please remember to leave a like, a comment, share the video about, and if you haven't already, subscribe. Thank you. Well, isn't this just fantastic? Hello everyone, welcome back to another exhibition of stupid people. Today we're going to start, because I'm quite a fan of it, with Star Trek. If it wasn't already apparent enough, we're in a Defiant. Half the time I'm wearing a Enterprise uniform. Yes, I think it's superior to Star Wars. You're all welcome, and you can debate it in the comments. Of course, if you are more a Star Wars fan than a Star Trek fan, you're allowed to be wrong. It's okay. I will accept your wrongness, because I believe in your right to tell me in the comments, to drive up the engagement with your wrongness. The reason why is because of the EU, who has taken issue with gendered language. Not even a joke. The EU, to me, is still a bit of a joke in and of itself. Its existence just undermines each individual member's nation state, their sovereignty, many of whom are willing to give it up for what they consider to be the greater good. A comedian called James A. Caster compared the United Kingdom leaving to that of a tea bag in a cup of tea. Collectively, in the bag you are stronger together, but you remove the bag and everything falls apart. Apparently in this metaphor, the United Kingdom was the tea bag itself, not the leaves. While a very British interpretation of it, I felt he was incorrect for a whole plethora of reasons, and I still voted to leave and do not regret my decision. To an article though. According to Star Trek lead William Shatner, a recent recommendation made by the European Union against using the offensive gendered language featured in the original series of Star Trek is yet another example of presentism run amok in modern society. William Shatner had tweeted, "Presentism at work yet again. Why start at Trek? Isn't it better to start at the beginning and redo foundation materials such as Magna Carta, religious writings, works of Shakespeare, before worrying about a silly TV show opening that reflects social commentary of the time? If people are offended by 6 seconds of dialogue recorded in 1966 without a modicum of understanding of the social issues at the time, there's bigger issues that they need to deal with first, like educating themselves." Because in the intro, Kirk says, "To boldly go where no man has gone before," as if the show didn't set standards for its time, which led to many movies. We can start with the obvious kiss between Kirk and Uhura, if you like. Back to the article though. Throughout all of television history, few series have managed to produce an introductory sequence so ubiquitous to pop culture as that of the sci-fi franchise's debut entry. As featured in all but 2 episodes, those exceptions being its 2 pilot episodes, which were later included in the series' first season as The Cage and Where No Man Has Gone Before respectively. Said intro begins with Shatner's Kirk declaring space the final frontier, and then the entire quote, which every Trek fan knows without even having to read it. The European Institute for Gender Equality, LOL, chose to highlight Captain Kirk's message of hope as a negative example of gendered language, because when you're black-pilled and boomer enough, you will find fault in anything with the word man in it. In their 2009 toolkit on gender-sensitive communication, the official EU agency included a section detailing solutions for how to use gender-sensitive language. That's 2009. Alright, therein attempting to highlight examples of situations where women may be subject to invisibility or omission and alternatives to use. Individuals should remove the gendered noun and instead recite the phrase as "to boldly go where no one has gone before." But no one is a gender as well. Did you not know? I have a video of somebody admitting to being it because they don't identify as any gender. Apparently they identify as what many refer to their pets, it. Or perhaps because they think they're a clown. Now the article I'm citing does point out this toolkit was published 15 years ago and was only recently brought to light because of The Sun, which then got the attention of William Shatner. It was also pointed out, and if you're a TNG person you'll know this as well, the intro language had been changed decades ago. It really had. Picard had actually said to boldly go where no one has gone before, because Star Trek was, in and of itself, ahead of its time, getting ahead of these curves before they became problems. I would point out, if someone wanted to redo the Shatner thing, it would solely be to get back at William Shatner. and for no other reason other than because they don't like William Shatner, which I've noticed a lot on social media. Mostly from people bleating on Threads though, because they all rage quit Twitter. I wonder why. For those that follow the This Week at Twitter series, we had discussed William Shatner recently because he was omitted from a Star Trek Day picture, which made very little sense but actually did at the same time, because Star Trek, Paramount, many other places are so desperate to present equality in absolute form. They made sure to have an equal representation of men, women, and those by race, although they did at the same time omit at least one or two people who could have hit a few other quotas. Maybe they could have slid Harry Kim in there somewhere, and their totally native Chakotay. And just because this tickled me to no end, a reply to William Shatner incoming, all the Karen raging. Although that one at the bottom, wasn't that the one that screamed when Trump was inaugurated? Yeah, that was a good one. I enjoyed that moment. I'm English, so I'm allowed to, apparently. While it can be argued the EU was ahead of its time pushing this gendered nonsense, at the same time, the fact it even needed to exist for the sake of gender equality speaks volumes about how you're so desperate to erase men, and the time period for which the shows are relevant from, the impact they had then socially to push a current year message, which in turn gives William Shatner all the validation to attack you, because while it has come to light now, it still amply and adequately demonstrates just how pointless your policies are. They are, let's face it, trivial. I figured we'd start with something mild, because I think it's quite important to highlight something I love, but also talk about something I find tickle-worthy, especially when you realise this had to be brought to light 15 years after it was first introduced, and actually there's a point there as well, because social media wasn't as big a thing back then. It really wasn't. So to see it now and see what has gone under the radar, yeah, it's fascinating, especially when you find that many of those member states that are so desperate to be a part of it, willing to give up their sovereignty, will vote on things because even with language barriers they know nothing of what is actually going on, which could be argued to be a form of tragic at this point. Especially tragic if you are quite the TOS fan. Honourable mention before we move on to the next subject goes to the Mid-Norfolk Member for Parliament George Freeman, who recently resigned as the Science Minister. In a blog post he said he stood down because my mortgage rises this month from £800 per calendar month to £2,000, which I simply couldn't afford to pay on a ministerial salary. Downing Street later confirmed they have no plans to change their approach to ministerial pay. A basic MP salary is £86,584 a year. That's what it is as a baseline. As a minister, it was £118,000. But this moron, with all the expenses he can claim, couldn't afford a £2,000 a month mortgage, an increase of which was entirely his government's fault in the first place. Inflation, increase, cost of living skyrocketing is entirely the fault, the onus of those in charge. Now granted, George Freeman is actually a very well-respected individual within the scientific field. He was the right person for the job. He has had ministerial roles in the past and received severance pays for each individual time. For example, under Boris Johnson, he quit as the science minister and got nearly £8,000 because you are allowed to receive a certain amount, a percentage of severance to accommodate for your reduction in salary. Yes? Okay. Ministers can also have their rent paid for, mortgages in fact, as an expense when they have a second home. So please do explain to me, you fat dobber, how you can't afford your mortgage, an increase of which was entirely your government's fault in the first place. What are you doing, going to salt bays on a monthly? So next we need to talk about Egypt. Articles have been doing their rounds of late because of mass renovations taking place at certain key pyramids at Giza. Many have dubbed this work, this renovation work, as absurdity. Mustafa Waziri is the head of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities. He believes that this is the project of the century. A video that was posted to Facebook shows Mustafa Waziri showing workers setting crude and chunky blocks of granite on the base of the pyramid, which sits beside the Sphinx. As workers toil beside the juxtaposing grey and golden blocks, Mustafa Waziri gestures as he informs viewers about the process. What I'm going to do now is read some of the reactions before we get to a further explanation for this renovation work. When will the project to straighten the Tower of Pisa be planned? Rather than tiles, why not wallpaper the pyramids? The only thing missing was to add tiling to the Pyramid of Menkaure. When are we going to stop the absurdity in the management of Egyptian heritage? All international principles on renovations prohibit such interventions. with this individual calling on all archaeologists to mobilize immediately. I feel like that's almost an Avengers Assemble, but with trowels and brushes. When originally built, the pyramid was encased in granite, but over time lost part of its covering. The renovation is claimed to aim to restore the structure's original style by reconstructing the granite layer. The work is believed to be lasting 3 years and will be Egypt's gift to the world in the 21st century. Mustafa Waziri heads the Egyptian-Japanese mission in charge of the project. The issue of heritage preservation in Egypt, which derives 10% of its gross domestic product from tourism, is often the subject of heated debate. And that's because recently, there was destruction of entire areas of Cairo's historic area, led to powerful mobilizations by civil society, which is largely banned from political activity and now concentrates the bulk of its fight with the government on urban planning and heritage issues. With the more recent discussions, let's call it that, being focused on Abu al-Abbas al-Mirzi Mosque in the city of Alexandria. This led to local authorities investigating after a contractor in charge of the renovation decided to repaint it in white, which covered up the ornate carved and coloured ceilings of the city's largest mosque. Many people have very strong views when it comes to what is happening with these pyramids, as you've seen from those comments. I, in truth, don't actually have an opinion on it. We have seen over the years many do restoration projects on various structures, on various pieces of art. It is quite common to restore or preserve as best as one can. The problem with the pyramids is one that many exterior structures has, is that they are subject to the damage of time. Something which, when it makes up such a vital part of your economy, over 10% from tourism, you would want to preserve as much as possible. Money, after all, does talk, and Egypt would do well to try and keep them. However, they themselves are guilty of damaging their own history for what they consider a grander or bigger picture, which does set them up for failure and many accusations that they themselves do not care for their own past or respect their own past. One thing that might well harm them, though, is if they encase the entire pyramid in granite, while ensuring the protection of what is underneath, you are burying what is underneath under a new casing. The fact these structures have lasted as long as they have is another aspect of what draws people to them. That's why some people try and climb them when they get the chance. And if you're able to do this to a pyramid of such grand age, why don't you just make more of them anyway? There are many questions that can be asked, and of course I am not Egyptian, so I cannot speak of any position or from any position of authority, more a curiosity with how this is being done. But understandably there is a lot of outrage and it's hardly going to change anytime soon. But I do fully expect to see the Sphinx updated as well, with Artex. The last subject I want to talk about concerns a voluntary police officer and a busker. A gospel singer called Harmony London posted a video recently of a confrontation with an officer. This is a volunteer police officer, by the way. In the video, Harmony London, regularly performing to, well, passers-by, has more than 300,000 subs on YouTube, and on a daily does these songs in London, in Oxford Street. Oxford Street has rules and regulations. You need a license, for example, to be able to do busking in Oxford Street, because the Westminster City Council policy applies to what is considered a light touch licensing scheme. Only in designated pitches can you do this. Obviously you get a license. You are not allowed to obstruct people's ability to walk on those paths. It's very important. The officer, in the video that has gone somewhat viral on her Instagram, Harmonies that is, the officer tells her that she's not allowed to sing her gospel songs outside of church grounds, which is a very odd thing to say to a busker who, on a daily basis, has been doing this for a while. A very odd thing. The argument that runs counter to this is that under UK law, Article 9, you have the right to freedom of religion, and belief is one of the rights protected by the Human Rights Act. Therefore, this officer is in the wrong, that you can in fact sing these songs wherever you want, really. Volunteer police officers are generally looked down upon, because while they do have similar powers to that of a police officer, they're unpaid, they're kind of useless. They do sometimes, though, give evidence in court. But if you hear this and you're one of them, you're useless. I hope you know that. This one, in the video, has an unpronounceable name because she comes from Bulgaria, lives in the United Kingdom, is actually just a Costa Coffee worker. Well, formerly, according to her LinkedIn page that has since been deleted. In this the police officer, the voluntary one anyway, has gotten the law wrong, because we know what the law is on busking, we know what the rules are on designated spots. We are also acutely aware of the rules concerning one's right to freely express themselves when it comes to their faith. I am curious what you all think about this, because I think it's really dumb to just go in on someone for singing in public. Busking is the argument, of course. You could have gone in on whether they have a license. Perhaps that would have been the easier mark to go for, as opposed to simply saying, I just don't like your songs because they're religious by nature, and you're not allowed to do that outside of church grounds. Is this the part where we all start cracking off some songs that are derived from faith? I'll go back to my middle school days where people sang The Water of Life in middle school. I did not, by the way, and the school had to repeatedly do the song over and over again because nobody said water of life, they said water of life. And, well, the deputy head did not appreciate that. Whereas I just sat there with my mouth shut, ignoring them because I laughed at the idea that one individual gave us the water of life. I think you'll find a decent water of life is bought in a shop, preferably an Isla 16-year-old single malt called Lagavulin. Now, as I have been doing this every week this year, I have asked you to tell me what you think the dumbest is, so I can collect them all together for a big end of year. These are the dumbest things from the entire year video. Do let me know in the comments. Drive up the engagement, it really helps us. Thank you all very much for being here. I'm on Twitch later. Hope to see you there. If not, have a fantastic day. And thank you very much for listening.